My name is Fred Franklin, and I came to Stafford because I had a teaching job. But I will say that when I got the contract to sign, it was 9 pennies postage due. I always remembered that. I thought, is this an inauspicious start? But anyway, I signed it, and the application said, "Do you perform on a musical instrument in public?" No. Okay. And still don't. And then I went the first day of the school, which wasn't completely finished. And it was the new Gale Middle School for T. Benton Gale, who'd been the superintendent forever of here and King George. And that first year was his last year. And so it was another world. But what made it interesting was I had just finished college, and excuse me, the Beatles had appeared in New York, which we saw the night, and it was the 300th anniversary of Stafford County. And so when I got here, people would tell me about dancing the minuet in the show there and what they had done in the show for that 300th. And then the children would all talk about the Beatles. And they would also talk about what they were doing when Kennedy was killed, which had been the fall before. So it was sort of, in some way or another, a central moment, because the school was new and the whole idea of the junior high school. And then it seemed like sort of the beginning of housing developments and schools being built. And 95 was new. That was part of it, just not too old. And that changed the area completely, because it cuts right through Stafford. And all of that had its effect, I think. It was a rural area when I came. The children's accent was different. It was what you might call a country accent, which I'm sure I still have. But when they spoke, I can't hear that accent in Stafford anymore. If I go to the schools, then the kids sound like they do anywhere else, and they look like they do anywhere else. But we were considered the poor cousin. And, you know, James Monroe High School was just an academy. I mean, people sent their children from Stafford over there to go to school because this is as good as a private school education, they thought. It was just all the difference. And as I taught, and in really the first 5 or 6 years, that began to stop, and people began to send their children, to keep their children in Stafford, and also occasionally send them from the city over here. And so from a school teacher's thinking, that was a neat point. I think the school system, I always say it was, and I can bring 10 people in here to agree with me, that I think it was a golden age of it. And there was a lot of building of schools, there was a lot of concern about schools, there was a lot of interest, and a lot of appreciation from parents of things that were done, I found. The other thing that made my tenure here different was Shirley Heim came over from the city, and at the age of federal money, which I thought was a wonderful age and we should have kept it. But anyway, she was just remarkable at getting federal money. And back in 1969 or 70, she brought in then, which was a huge amount, $500,000 from the federals. And we began to do things in the school system with that. And she had done Head Start and then been nationally recognized here. And then we did the Title III project, Exploring Creative Frontiers, and that was nationally recognized. And so that would be my history of Stafford, is the change in the school system. And I think it became better. I think it became more acknowledged. You know, the great thing then was if you could finally get a football team to beat James Monroe. Ha! Well, you know, coaches were brought in from other lands who could accomplish this miracle. And finally it was accomplished, and then finally it didn't matter anymore because the students in Stafford were so new to the area. They had never been to Fredericksburg. So I have children, I started back in the 80s, I guess, teaching children who had never been to Fredericksburg. And so Stafford had become a thing all its own, and we turned north more, I think. Well, I think we were so much, there were so many, it is a bedroom community, and the people come from the north where they worked all day on the trains, whatever. And I think so much, I just think we lost our sense of being from Fredericksburg. I remember when the 2 or 3 young men who won the Olympics several years ago were announced on international television as being from Fredericksburg. And there was a great hue and cry here. They're not from Fredericksburg, they're from Stafford. And of course they were, but it was just grouped as that. But I think Stafford began to, it had its own identity, but it was the poor cousin, it was the joke, it was where the Hicks. I remember one time there was a huge football game between James Monroe and Stafford, and then there was a pep rally at James Monroe, and they were told that in honor of playing Stafford, everybody would wear a white sock the next day, because white socks, that was considered what Hicks wore at that time, and so that would show their great sophistication. And they would, you know, they were going over to play Stafford. Well, you know what it's like over there, it is different. I was at a party one time, and I talked to this woman who is in Fredericksburg, and she said, how is it, what do you do? And I said, I teach English in Stafford. And she said, that must be very difficult because a lot of those children come from homes where English is not spoken. I guess that was the Polish community or something. But I remember that comment, and and we, with great energy and fortitude, set out to stop that. The teaching profession here did. James Monroe was, and still is, a small school. They did fine. It was very contained. It was a city, a small city, and it was very contained, and whereas Stafford just went all over the place. And you had, I think probably the school system was stronger then. And, but we set out to change that. I think that's the history of Stafford that interests me, because I was a teacher. The diversity, and then also students moving from so many places. When I first went to North Stafford in 1981, I took a survey, and I think maybe I had 5 children who'd been born in Stafford. And you could tell the natives, I mean, and they said, well, we were here. And then you would have people say, well, when we first came here, there was hardly any buildings. They had come in the 80s and thought, well, we were right in the middle of the country. And of course, even that changed. 610 is a good example of it. If you want to see, none of that was there in 81. There was a 7-Eleven down by the school. Another building that had a sign on the side, we got the crabs. And then 1 or 2, and there was not, that's it. You just drove down an expanse with a few houses. And now you can't get out in 610. It's just density. There's one field at part of 610, and when I go down it, I always look to see if that field is still there, because I think that's the last remnant. And then, of course, there was a great feeling between South and North Stafford. You know, the people in South Stafford have been here longer than the people. And I think there may still be a difference in that. And the people in North Stafford, well, they came here from everywhere. They do this. And then, of course, you would always have the places like Somebody was from White Oak, and that would be commented on. And somebody was from Widewater, that would be commented on. So there was an identity of these little areas, which I think is great. But that was what it was, and this is what it is now.